another independence vote. Let's go to Canberra now, and joining us live is Liberal MP Tim Wilson. Tim, good to see you. Thanks as always for your time. I was just having a chat with Michael McCormack about migration, which would form a key plank of our economic recovery. Of course, it's at zero at the moment, and it's all dependent on international borders. But when would you like to see migrants allowed back in?
Well, we've always been an immigrant nation, and it's been a pathway for underwriting our economic prosperity and making sure we have skills. But there's also a constant test of proportionality around making sure we can get people into Australia safely. And of course, we can maintain the COVID normal that we have come to experience at this point. So I don't have a deadline for you, Peter.
Yeah.
The answer is as soon as possible. But we all know why it's important that while we've had a pause, that I have businesses all over the country saying to me, we need people, we need labour, we need skills.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a critical part of the discussion.
Yeah, it's big shortages for farmers as well. Wouldn't opening up
It's across
quarantine...
the board. IT, everything.
Wouldn't quarantine facilities, if you were able to build them, wouldn't that be able to speed up that process?
Well, there are lots of things that will impact that process, and that's why we've doubled. If you talk about quarantine, that's why we've doubled Howard Springs to make sure that returning Australians can get home. And that should be our first priority, making sure Australians can return home. And then following through with that to make sure that we provide pathways for other things, like other people, like international students and, of course, skilled labour.
Yeah.
So that's part of the plan. It'll continue to be part of the plan. But thankfully, we're a country where most people want to get here, and so it's a question about how we do it and do it in a sustainable way.
As a Victorian, are you supportive of that facility in Mickleham?
Well, like the federal government, despite how the Victorians raised it, where they said, we've got an idea, but by the way, you've got to pay for it, we should still look at it with open eyes, because if we can have the infrastructure to get returning Australians home faster, that's always something worth considering. And we frankly don't know how far we are through this pandemic. While it might feel for many people like we're hopefully at the tail, we never know what further mutations could come, so I think there has to be a basis to look at these sorts of facilities.
OK, on to budget matters. An interesting piece in the AFR this morning. Josh Frydenberg's downsizer scheme has been extended to people aged 60, so it's come down from those aged 65, so they can put more of their cash into super once they downsize. What do you make of that? Well,
I fundamentally support it, because one of the biggest challenges we have in making sure young Australians can get into the housing market is making sure that people aren't living in oversized houses they no longer need, or large houses they no longer need that are oversized for their purpose. So if downsizers are able to get into smaller homes and to graduate through their stages of life more smoothly, it enables young Australians to be able to move up the property ladder and to get into larger homes when they're having kids. So there's those benefits. Then, of course, there's the obvious benefits for those people. We want Australians to be self-funded in retirement if they can be. We want to respect people's savings and sacrifice. And a critical part of people's savings for retirement is owning their own home, which is why I've always argued it should be home first, super second.
You have, yeah. But, I mean, this downsizer scheme, do you think this energises the argument that those scheduled rises should not go ahead?
We'll wait and see what's in the budget tomorrow, but I've always said that the case for increasing the SG has to be made, and has to be made that it's actually delivering a benefit. Independent analysis by the Grattan Institute has made it quite clear Australians already save enough for retirement. And, of course, increasing the amount of money young Australians are forced to save for superannuation now comes at the expense of them saving for a deposit for their first home. OK,
quite a piece from the Global Times over the weekend, Tim, which is, of course, China's government mouthpiece. It's proposing retaliatory punishment against Australia over Taiwan. So there's a quote here. The plan should include long-range missile strikes on the military facilities on Australian soil if it really sends its troops to China's offshore areas and combats against the PLA. What do you make of this? And should the ambassador be called in?
Well, of course, I would think that language is needlessly inflammatory, and I'm sure other people would too. It doesn't reflect the sentiment of how Australians are viewing these issues, but the Global Times is often out there much further ahead than even public sentiment in either Australia or China, because they're trying to, they're the propaganda arm of the Chinese Communist Party internationally. I suspect this is about sending a message to other countries more than it is to us. And of course, all we've ever said and all we ever will say is that we stand for the right to determine our own future and our own destiny as a nation. And we want to have sovereign states able to do the same because it's good for international community. We don't see ourselves as the centre of the world. We see ourselves as part of a stable region and a community of nations.
It singles out Australia, though. I mean, it's basically threatening a strike on the homeland.
Well, that's a question you have to ask them about what motivates them, but our position remains the same, which is to make sure that we're standing up for our national interest. Of course, China has a right to stand up for its national interest, but we do it on the basis of peace and trade and recognising, respecting other nations. And of course, we'd hope that other countries would behave in exactly the same way.
Tim Wilson, thanks for your time. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Pete.
Let's stay in Canada.